Sign language is another very important communication. And it is this book, The Sign of Language, that tells us sign language is not just pantomime. Sign language is a real language. And that's a story that several years ago, about 5 years ago, we have in Taiwan the handicap, the Olympic in Taiwan. And then there are coming a lot of deaf people from all over the world. And we want to find a translator. And I try to tell them, no, you cannot have just one translator. Because there are different sign languages. There are American Sign Language people, there are English Sign Language, and there are different sign language. But government, someone from the very authoritative people said, no, sign language people have only one sign language. They're just pointing, that's all. So I said, no, we should budget something to hire more people. And they tell me no. So I said, well, I cannot fight you because you control the money. But then when they begin to show up to come in for the rehearsal, and then they look at the Dutch sign language people, the deaf people, they look at American, and they look at English, the British, and finally they find that every one of them are talking different sign language. I said, you use English in American, you use English in England, your sign language should be the same, but they are different. So I have to point to them in Taiwan, even in Taiwan, the government created one official sign language based upon the Mandarin syntax, and sometimes it's a kind of a character base. Government is very goodwill because they find out Taipei deaf people, Taichung deaf people, and Tainan Kaohsiung deaf people are not familiar with each other's language. 南腔北调各有千秋. So the government said, let's unify them. Yes. Or in the school and everybody was singing all this sign language. But in the natural deaf people's community, nobody's using it. And they hate it, in fact. Okay? So sign language is a very natural born. They can even have poetry. They can behave, they can in a theater. And then that little girl, interestingly, is doing a sign. Whispering. So you can see the sign and the facial expression. There are space. And so John came, Jim came, Tim came. And then we say, he left. Question is, which one is left? Which one left? We cannot differentiate it. 张三来了，李四来了，王五来了，他走了，到底是哪个走了？ We have no way to differentiate that, but they are very good at it. They said, 张三 here, 李四 here, 王五 here, and they said, this one is gone, so you know that's 李四. They use space as a linguistic device. So everyone had created their own world in a very intricate way, and then you make a communication possible. I don't think I have time to get into this, but just to give you a glimpse of this. So you can see it's actually very intricate, and the facial expression is very, very unique. And only the natural born native signer have that expression in their face. We cannot do it as well. So when you look at someone who is signing on the television, you can say, well, that's a second language learner. That's not a real one, because their facial expression is not that good. You know everything about it. But anyway, you can see. So we did some study in Taiwan, and we take the signers who look at the pictures, and the signers sometimes look at the picture, how they sign language, and then the brain scanning, and we also have word. And you can see, one thing I want you to see is when they use a manipulative sign, their motor strip in the brain actually very active. In other words, all the linguistic was coded in the embodiment of the concept that's already expressed in a depth, just like in speech. So, now let's get to reading. So sign language is a natural-born language. It's important, and it's just like our language. When you move outside, it change, so that they're diversified in every corner of the world. And this is a reading. Everybody familiar with the Guangong reading? You need to see the eye movement. You need to focus. You have to memorize. You have to use a lot of knowledge. So, in reading, you need to pick up semantic. You need to map them onto the orthography. You have to have phonology. But the question, for example, we used to say Chinese is a pictograph. Well, I never understand that mean. But anyway, if you look at this one is picture, mouth, 松鼠, squirrel. And then this one is characters. And then you show them, and then you read, and you look at the picture naming and word naming. And then they're moving. Well, anyway, we can do this. Actually, there's an animation you can see. When you look at the word, and when you look at the pictures, there are, you see, we all started with 松鼠 and the pictures in the same visual area, but then visual area enlarged, and visual area begin to spread. This is what we so-called word area, word form, visual word form area. And then pretty soon you can see, you begin to see the semantic and then phonetic coming up. So looking at the picture of a squirrel compared with looking at the 松鼠, two characters, in terms of processing differences, they are different. Okay? So we are not looking at them as pictures. We're looking at them as words. And at the very beginning, we have all these neurons. A word can be, if you look at it, analytical in the left, sequential, logical, linguistic, the general and holistic, plural, emotional, visual, spatial in the left, right. And then you can do a study. Actually, this study was done by a long time ago by Bill Wang and I. At that time, to challenge the idea that the Chinese characters has been all processed in the right hemisphere, because there's a growing literature at that time in Japan by saying that the characters is in the right, katakana, hiragana is in the left. In fact, they're all in the left, including Chinese characters. And so we try to demonstrate that. And then, this is just to show you the experiment long time ago, and then how this study was done without scanning at that time. we have to use a tachyscope to do it. And this one is a little bit improvement of the early day studies. So this study was challenged by a group of people in Taiwan. So maybe it's difficult to replicate. So we have another group of people did this study from the beginning, from the scratch. They replicated so well. And so it's just without using a scanning, you can see Chinese characters in the left hemisphere. I won't get into another, that's another a series of work. But the most important thing is now we get into ERP measurement. Chinese characters, there's a right-hand side here. If I don't point it out, do you know that's a temple? The miao. 寺庙. And so semantic activation of phonological component. 时 is based upon the sound 是. But the meaning of 是 was actually there, but disappeared very quickly. So we can run a study to do this. And the study is, for example, you take phone, maple, wind, phone, that's the same sound, versus chai. Chai is chai, inside is qin, so they are different. So qin and purple are related. Feng and yu are related. So using a EEG study, ERP study, you can begin to demonstrate when they are congruent with each other. Your brainwave is actually showing general, not much negativity. But when you have a mismatch, chai, qin, then you show a big spike of negativity in your brain. So it's clearly experiment was done and will show you that compare with the fu qi has no relation in terms of inside and outside. But feng and yu, if you look at this, feng, yu, feng and feng are the same. Stem and the whole characters, so they last longer together. And then after 30 milliseconds, they behave just like a fu qi. Chai and zi, chai and qin are different to begin with, so they only last 50 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, they are gone. As if in your brain, you are activating a lot of information, and then you're putting them together and say, well, is it useful? No, kick it out. If they're useful, maybe I'll look at them for a longer time. So it's just like in a brain, I'm making activation, integration, and then inhibit or kick out. Our brain is working dynamically to look at this, okay? So if we look at language in many different forms, there are Hebrew, language, English, idioma, that's Spanish. I cannot say it, but you say it better. Longer language for French. I cannot say it. But, and then Korean. And then the last one is Japanese borrowing our characters is called Gengo. And you can see the brain try to handle this. We are now able to get a real good pictures of how it's because so many studies has been done. So we are able to get a pictures of Hiccup and Purple talking about all this area of tracing from lexical interface, combination network, and how we are doing in terms of reading. And this is another one that tries to talk about each area. But I just want to look at you here. This is the left hemisphere. And this is where we call word form area. Somehow, in the left hemisphere down below, that's the area used to be very good at facial recognition, object recognition. Right hemisphere even better. But somehow, when you show the characters or words for a non-reader that begin to read, learning to read, their right hemisphere fired for it because they don't know what that is not a word for them yet. But after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years of study, the words, learn to read, become a reader. Now you show the characters, you show the words, they shift to left hemisphere right away. The right hemisphere, you kind of drop out. But the very important point is, do they recognize it as a form? Yes, but not linguistically. But if you show them that compare the form, the right hemisphere is still very good. So in other words, we show a duplex effect that two function was still there. And then Bill told me about this in Nature that people talk about. Most people are not weird because all the study that has been done on reading is based upon good scientists in good school with their good students. And who are they? They are Western and they are educated, they're industrialized, they are rich and democratic people. So our sample is really limited that we're talking about reading. But if you begin to look at it, there are people who cannot read. You can see this is Brazil workers. Many of them cannot read. So if you compare with their brain, and especially the area that I talk about, visual area, you can see this particular area, they are not light up just like a literate person. In other words, so our brain has changed in terms of plasticity. Our brain was changed because of reading, learning to read. That's the point that I'm getting at. This is just to show you the literate to illiterate behavioral and cerebral changes induced by reading acquisition. You can see the area has been responsible for all this activity in the brain. So you really have to study this kind of work, reading, across different languages. Can I just, in a second, one language, English, with all these rich people, democratic people, we have to reach everyone. So we need Japan, China, Hong Kong, Macau, Australia, Israel, and then Bill is our leader on this group who is leading us, talking to all sort of people. So we have in McGill, UCL, UC, San Diego, that people are all devoted to look at these problems. You cannot just study by one language and tell the story. You have to study many, many different languages. So it had to be cross-language, cross-country. And then we had compared with the different machine. And we talk about speech and speech in the left hemisphere. So we have English, Spanish, Hebrew, Chinese. These are the focus of this work, probably last December in PNS, and universal brain signature of proficient reading, evidence from 4 contrasting languages. Why contrasting? You look at Hebrew. Hebrew has no vowel. They deleted the vowel in their printing. Young kids has the vowel. Become a good reader, the vowel has been taken off. And then in Spanish, it's very clear, letter sound correspondence. English is not as good, Hebrew is not as good, of course. Chinese is even worse. And so you need to compare in a gradation of this contrast. And so, if you look at a brain, you look at a lot of commonalities among all the 4 languages. And the Chinese, English, Hebrew, Spanish. we all converge at the same area. That's the gist, the point of the last year's paper in PNAS. Now we are analyzing this data in more detail because we're looking at now not just the area, but the connection. Then you begin to see the difference. Chinese are different from all the alphabetic system because our connection, even in the same area, but the connectivity of the wave is different. Because we, for example, if I say 成大, I see 成大, you hear 成大, I don't know whether I'm talking about City University of Hong Kong or Taiwan, 成功大学. So I really need to look at the other characters. So I need to have different and then make visual verification that I do have a component 土字 that make it 城市大学 in Hong Kong. So these are kind of connectivity that we are talking about. Yeah, area is universal. Activation is universal, but connectivity is different. So last night, that's the reason we work. Last night I had to work because we have a Skype conference last night among all Israel, Spanish, US, and then their East Coast and West Coast and Taiwan. And we discuss the data and we fight. So last night, no ending. We just fought and then everybody had their own idea. What's the difference? Anyway, we're still fighting.